welcome to 5 Good Questions. I'm your host, Jake Taylor. Our guest today is Michael Shermer. Dr. Shermer is the founding publisher of Skeptic magazine, a monthly columnist for Scientific American, a regular contributor to Time.com, and presidential fellow at Chapman University. He's been a college professor since 1979, where he's taught a transdisciplinary course for Ph.D. students on evolution, economics, and the brain. As a public intellectual, he regularly contributes op-eds, book reviews, and essays to the Wall Street Journal, LA Times, Science, Nature, and other publications. He has 2 TED Talks which have been seen by millions and were voted in the top 100 of more than 1,000 TED Talks. Today we're going to be discussing his book Skeptic, Viewing the World with a Rational Eye. I met Dr. Shermer at a conference last summer, and he's a fascinating person to talk to. Let's ask him 5 good questions. All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. My guest today is Michael Shermer, author of Skeptic. Thanks, Michael, for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
So just jumping right in, question number 1. How has reasoning and scientific thinking changed the way that we view morality and created a more just world?
Well, that, of course, is the premise of the moral arc, and
Yeah.
we spent almost 500 pages arguing that. But the Reader's Digest condensed version is that ever since the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, we've started down this road of a program in which we assume that the universe is knowable. It's governed by laws that we can understand. We can write them down mathematically or in language. And then we can use those principles and apply them to industry, trade, science, technology, society, economics, politics, and so on. And that's really what we've been doing for 500 years, is trying to solve social problems. So in other words, instead of moralizing about problems that we call sins or ills of society, we're treating them as problems to be solved, and that science and reason are the best tools we have for solving those kinds of problems. And so I start with Newton and Galileo and Kepler and so on, just the physical sciences. But it wasn't long after the scientific revolution before thinkers started applying those same kinds of principles to society. Like, how can we figure out how societies are governed and then change the laws or conditions by which they are governed so that it's better for mankind. So that's what we've been doing.
Perfect. And then that's led into further and further narrowing in on a better view of morality. Is that accurate?
Yes,
to say?
I think so. Our intuitions we have today about concerns for the suffering of animals, for example.
Right.
That's a fairly new thing. I mean, people really didn't care that much about that in centuries past, and so we've sort of expanded our moral considerations to include minorities, women, Jews, and so forth, to have the same rights as everybody else, to be treated equally under the law. And that moral sphere just keeps expanding. Now we're even including animals, and then the next frontier will be artificial intelligence. I mean, should robots have rights? This has already been played out, of course, in science fiction, like in Star Trek, where Data had to be put on trial as an individual. Is he a person or not? But we're getting to the point where that could come up, in the next few decades to a century or so, and that's just a continuation of our expansion of our moral considerations, the moral sphere, to include more people in it, and then more things. And ultimately, I think we could not. There's no there to get there, because we can't achieve utopia. But just to make improvements every unit of time, every day, every week, every month, every year, things are a little bit better. And of course, it's not a perfect linear curve. It's more like the global warming curve, up and down, up and down, up and down. But the overall sawtooth blade is pointed upward. So 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Yes, of course, there's things like ISIS and Syria and racial tensions with police and inner city African American communities. Yes, those things are all real. No one denying that we don't live in a perfect society, but we're getting there. It's getting better.
Yeah, that's a great segue for question number 2 is, why do you think it is that people think that things are bad and seem to be getting worse? Everyone has these kind of I don't want to say delusions, but ideas that, oh, you know, the 1950s were this golden era.
Yes.
When in fact, things are actually good and probably getting better. So why is there so much doom and gloom, pessimism, when really optimism and gratitude is what should fill most of our waking thoughts?
Absolutely, yeah. And I never know why conservatives are so obsessed with 1950s. I like to simply remind them that the upper tax bracket was about 90% for the wealthy. Are you sure you want to go back to the 1950s?
Yeah.
Not to mention, the dreck that was on television and the lack of civil rights for anyway. So no, of course things are better, way better than they were in the 1950s. Today's conservatives are more liberal than liberals were in the 1950s, socially anyway. And so the reason I think it's hard for us to realize that is a couple of factors. One is the news media. If it bleeds, it leads. That it's the job of the daily news to report the bad things that happen. That they don't report long-term trends. They report headlines. That today there was a mass shooting, then there was a riot, then there was a police incident, and then there was more destruction in Syria, and ISIS did this, and a terrorist attack in Iraq, and so on. I mean, this is what gets reported, and if you just watch the news, you're naturally going to think things are bad and getting worse. So you got to follow the trend lines, not the headlines. And I don't blame the media. That's what their job is. But it's good to have people like us to remind people, hey, actually things are better, and even though they're not perfect. Then there's the kind of overall pessimism bias that is, it's called the negativity bias, or according to another famous paper by Roy Baumeister, called "Why Bad is Stronger Than Good," and this has to do with the fact that our senses are geared toward negative things. That is, in our ancestral environment in which we evolved, it paid to pay more attention to things that are potentially dangerous that could take you out of the gene pool, and not pay quite as much attention to the good things that happen. So incremental good progress just sort of goes unnoticed. It's like your heart keeps beating, you don't even notice it. But if you have a heart attack, you notice it. I mean, because this could take you out, right? So we have more words for negative emotions than positive emotions, for example. And when you run experiments, subjects are more finely tuned to bad things that can happen than good things that can happen. And there's hundreds of experiments like this. So doom and gloom is what sells. The apocalypse, doomsday. If you just look at what sells in literature, it's always bad news that sells. I mean, my friends tell me I should have written, instead of the moral arc, I should have, written the moral apocalypse is upon us. And this is the 21st century will be the end of humanity. Okay, but I have to be true to the data, and that's not what it shows. So the bias is certainly there. I understand it, and we have to combat against it. Nothing wrong with occasionally focusing on the bad things that need fixing. Of course, that's how progress happens. But let's not forget the long-term perspective that we should be grateful for how good life is for us now.
Yeah, and I think Warren Buffett continues to say, he said it now for 20 years, I think at least, but that the luckiest person is the person who's born today. They're going to have the best life, probably. Which
absolutely, and that may be true 500 years from now. I mean, there's nothing inevitable about this, but the chances of it going in reverse in some dramatic way is very unlikely. I mean, no state is going to reinstitute slavery as a legal institution. Never going to happen. No one's going to take the vote away from African Americans or women or men. I mean, this is just not going to happen. There might be small little setbacks, but the small ones really are perhaps debatable. I mean, liberals and conservatives differ on certain issues, healthcare, abortion rights, things like that, and that's what a democracy is all about. But let's not forget that the overall system of pushing back and forth and competing for, space in the marketplace of ideas, that is one of the driving factors of moral progress. So free speech, open debate, this is all good. So we don't want to get away from that mechanism.
So you would think that there'd be a lot of chance of another kind of dark ages happening?
I don't think so. No, I don't. I mean, there are lots of people, probably in the majority, who think that's entirely possible. I don't think so. I would be quite shocked if something that dramatic happened. Again, I mean, people worry about Putin. Okay, yeah, he's probably a bad guy. But what are the chances he's going to like gobble up all of Eastern Europe, all the NATO states, and put together something like a Union of Soviet Socialist Republics on par with what, say, Stalin did and Khrushchev and so on? I doubt it. I mean, there might be little things like the Ukraine, annexing the Crimea, something like that. That can happen, but that's pretty small compared to the stuff that was going on in the middle of the 20th century.
Yeah, for sure. So question number 3, it seems to me like, and maybe I should confess that I'm currently agnostic on this subject. I just feel like I understand it well enough to come down on either side. But it seems like there's a lot of very reasonable and smart people on both sides of the climate change debate. Where are your thoughts these days?
Yeah, I don't really think it's a debate in terms of, is global warming real and is it human caused? That really is pretty well settled science, as the phrase is. And when we talk about consensus in science, we don't mean like it's a democracy and everybody votes because we all have our opinions. No, there's a real convergence of evidence over many decades, over many fields. These are unrelated fields. You got the guy drilling ice cores in Antarctica. You got somebody else measuring tree rings in Canada. You got ecologists and geologists and so on. These aren't people that know each other. They don't go to the same conferences. They don't publish in the same journals. They don't meet on the weekends to conspire against the conservative free marketers. I mean, it's nothing like that. I used to be a climate skeptic myself back in the 90s because I thought, these people have been saying the doom and gloom stuff since the 70s when I was in college. All that overpopulation, none of it happened. But that really has to do with what we should do about it. And I think there's still room for debate. That is sort of technological, scientific solutions versus economic government solutions. And, I think we can do both. I like cap and trade as a kind of a combination of market solutions and some government regulation. We need some rules by which we live, of course. And the common grounds, air, the oceans, and so on, you need some regulation for that, absolutely. But I also like the Elon Musk approach, as I call it. Let's just figure out a way to make a ton of money on green technologies. There were as many electric cars in New York City, electric taxis in New York City in 1910 than there were gas-powered cars. What happened? Imagine a century's worth of battery technology research and development, where we'd be now. I mean, already you can get 250 to 300 miles on a Tesla charge on a single drive. That's about to change. That'll be 500 miles within a couple of years, and that'll be the end of gas-powered cars. There's really no reason to have them other than recreational driving at a racetrack or something. But that's where we'll be. And so I think we can do that with, the Elon Musk approach. Every house should have a battery. Every house should have solar panels, and store all that electricity in your battery in your garage and your electric cars, and so on. These are all solutions that can be implemented now. I mean, there's tons of startup companies in Silicon Valley specializing in green technology. I encountered one last year of a company making cement that you will make buildings out of that absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. This is great. That's a solution that also is a good building tool, building construction materials, and it makes money. It's a win-win all the way around. And there's dozens of examples like that. And I think I'm pretty optimistic about that. Even though I think global warming is real and human caused, I'm not a doom and gloomer.
I know there's some people, I think, and maybe he's changed his mind on this, but last I remember, Matt Ridley, who I think is very interesting, I think he came down that it's real, it's man-made, but it may not be bad necessarily.
Yeah, they're called lukewarmers.
Okay, yeah.
Whatever the right phrase is. I know Matt pretty well. He's a very smart guy, very reasonable. And Bjorn Lomborg too. People vilify him like he's a climate denier, and he says in pretty much every interview he's ever given, global warming is real, it's human caused. It's like it just comes out. It's the first thing he says. It's like, all right, so what are we talking about then? Okay, yeah. Well, we're talking about what to do about it. And, he makes a good point, Bjorn Lomborg, that, we have limited resources. We don't have, trillions of dollars that's just lying around with nothing to do. You got to allocate them. What is your goal? If your goal is to just save lives and to help people that are living now, then the Bill Gates approach, let's spend our money. Let's go to Africa, mosquito nets, vitamins, eradicating, diseases like smallpox and polio. These are goals we can do now, far cheaper than, say, investing in reduction of CO2 gases in the next century. We'd have to spend a lot of money to make tiny little bit of progress. So again, as a democracy, we can debate, well, what is our goal? Is it 100 years from now? Is it next year? Something in between, allocate resources here, and here. It's a balancing act, but let's not forget that, we should pull back and take the big perspective, like where do we want to spend our money, and then go from there.
Right. So question number 4, it seems like there's a lot of products that fall into the can't hurt but might help category, and I'll confess one here myself and hopefully my wife never hears this, but she's bought some of these essential oils. I don't know if you are familiar with this.
Yes,
recent craze.
I am. Yes. Yes, I've used essential oils. I went to Deepak Chopra's place, his Chopra Center in Carlsbad, California. My wife and I went there a few months ago, and we got the whole treatment: the meditation, the tea, the yoga, the essential oils. I think it's the massage that makes the difference more than the oil.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's the whole package deal, and it's not that these things. Okay, let's pull back for a second. When we say does it work, I mean that's what we're asking. Does it work? Well, what do you mean does it work? Okay, so on one level, if I say, well, look, it makes me feel better. I don't know about you, but it makes me feel better to do whatever: meditate, get a massage, use these oils, whatever it is. Okay, fine. My headache went away. Okay, good for you. But what we want to know from a scientific perspective is, does it work for everybody? Or, 80% of the people that tried X, under these conditions, their pain went away, or their blood pressure went down, or whatever it is that you want to measure. There, it's harder, it's trickier. And I don't think the essential oils from the studies I've seen actually work in that sense. You could personally say, I get a lot out of it. I like the smell, the feel. It's great for massages. But okay, fine, that's great. But that's different than saying, medical doctors should be applying these technologies to their patients for these conditions. I don't think they have the evidence for that.
Yeah. So is there a downside, though, to maybe trying to take advantage of the placebo effect? Really, which is what it feels like what I'm doing a lot of times.
Yes, that's right. A lot of this is placebo, and on one level, no, it's okay. I mean, whatever it takes to work for you, whatever makes your headache go away or your cancer go into remission, if that happens, I'm happy for you. But again, that what we want to know from a scientific perspective, should the FDA approve this thing here for sale to the general public because the evidence shows that it does this consistently? There it's much harder. And so no, it's probably no harm that you use essential oils when you get a massage. Okay, yes, that's probably harmless, but we don't want people replacing traditional science-based medicine with something that's untested. As we like to say, there is no such thing as alternative medicine. There's just medicine. Or what you call alternative medicine that has evidence? Medicine. Okay, yeah. So I would put essential oils in that category. Use them if you want, fine, but don't ignore your doctor. Don't go off your meds. Don't use it as a replacement for science-based medicine.
So I should have been shunting that money into an HSA account instead of
well, maybe.
All right, so question number 5. Are there any investment takeaways? Because a lot of our audience skews towards the investment side in that you've found in your research and insights over the years of studying, being a skeptic, and writing for Skeptic magazine and for all the articles that you published over the years.
Investment tips, yeah. Buy low, sell high.
Well, that's a good tip.
It's not rocket science. I mean, if you bought a lot of stocks back in 08, 09, and you just let them sit there, you're probably pretty happy right now, and pretty much any of them. But what we know about investments from a skeptic's perspective is that, you have, say, 4,000 hedge fund managers. By the throw of a dart, it's pretty random about whether the the guy you pick to invest your money with is going to succeed or not in terms of beating the, say, S&P 500 average over the next 10 years. If you just stick it in a mutual fund for 10 years, you're going to get a return probably 8 to 10%. That's pretty consistent. It'll go up and down, but and so the question is, can the one you pick, the hedge fund manager, your investment expert, do better than that? And the problem is, from the research I've seen, is that no, you can't pick in advance which one will do better than that. I mean, they probably won't do worse than that unless they're day trading or something, which is not a good idea. And because we know that no one can consistently day trade better than the average S&P 500 over many, many years. And so again, it's like, I don't think there's any magic to it. Someone like a Warren Buffett, I mean, you can read his investment tips and whatever. I mean, you can't really go wrong there. And I don't have special insight beyond that, only to say that there's no free lunch. The Bernie Madoffs of the world, there's a reason he's in jail. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. Yeah. Now, yes, once in a while, like the famous Bill Miller who beat the S&P 500 15 years in a row. Yeah, but as Leonard Melandau shows in his book, The Drunkard's Walk, that's only a post-diction. That's looking at it after it already happened and go, look, there's the one who beat the S&P 500. But back in 1991, when his run started, could you have looked at the sea of 4,000 hedge fund managers and go, that's the one? No, and because that's the only thing that counts. If you start today, you look at all the different investment places you can go, or hedge fund manager. Which one? No one knows.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and then it's even tougher to overcome the costs typically.
Yes, they don't work for free.
Yeah, no, they don't. And from what I've seen, a lot of the research that most of any alpha that's generated ends up getting cleaned up in the costs, and you very rarely get over that hurdle.
That's right. We're in the middle. We're right at the middle of an 8-year bull market run. Okay, so I mean things look great, but there's nothing inevitable about this. A bear market is probably coming. There's probably going to be some adjustments. I haven't any idea how to beat that other than go more conservative and traditional stuff. I know this is what some of my friends tell me, but I don't know. Nope. And the thing is, no one really knows. Okay, no one knows. As they say, that predictions are hard to make, especially about the future. And boy, does that ever apply to the stock market and the financial industry.
For sure. So, a bonus question we always ask, and this is for a book recommendation.
All right. Well, my favorite book in the last many years, say decade or so, is Steven Pinker's The Better Angels of Our Nature. I do think this is probably the best social science book ever written. That's saying a lot because there's been a lot and a lot of important books, and I've read most of them. This is my area, social science, psychology, and I think Steve is one of the great thinkers and writers of our time, and Dawkins too. There's a handful of scientists whose literary style is so good they are deserving of the Nobel Prize, and I think Dawkins or Pinker might be should be in the running for that. And Dawkins has made a point recently that no scientist has ever won the Nobel Prize in literature, not one, never. Why is that? I mean, when you read a broad swath of literature and you read also people like Dawkins or Pinker, it's like, these guys write as good as these Nobel laureates in literature. Why aren't they winning? So it's time for that to change, I think. So and Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, that would be my nomination for a Nobel Prize in literature.
Wow, that's a good recommendation, and I do.
And Dawkins too. Dawkins' books, also, I mean the Selfish Gene. I mean, this is one of the life-changing, society-changing books. It really altered the way people think, and it's beautifully written. This is not just a grinding, boring book like a lot of science books are. No, there's a real narrative to it. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember the first time I read Selfish Gene, and it was just. I mean, there are rarely books that like actually make you stop and go, holy,
right.
Holy cow, this is incredible. I can't believe this.
And I've been to a lot of conferences with Richard where we're speakers. There's a bunch of speakers, and Dan Dennett, really smart people, really. But when Dawkins in particular says something, I notice it really changes the conversation. It's like all these really smart people are going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then Richard sits there quietly, and then he says something. And it's like, and the whole group is like, over here now. Oh no, and I could see it's like, okay, this guy, it's above all these really smart PhD professors, scientist types. They're all smart, but he's like another level up, Yeah. And it's we're fortunate to live in a time when we have thinkers like that we can just read.
Yeah, I think the British accent doesn't hurt either.
Yeah, that's true. For Americans, they always think that they're much smarter. Although, as Stephen Hawking says, he has now the American accent, whatever that is.
Well, Michael, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and it was a real pleasure chatting with you.
You're welcome. Thanks for doing this. This is good. Books are good. I see you still have physical books behind you, as do I. I'm still a fan. I have audiobooks and ebooks, but I still like a good physical book. Like, well, Deepak just sent me a copy of his new book which I reviewed in galley form, and it's good. A good physical book.
Yeah, I think I've from a note-taking standpoint, I feel like I'm probably missing the boat by not being more in the digital world. I mean, it makes sense for just capturing, highlighting things and pulling it out for later, but I just haven't been able to get myself to get off of the physical books. I just like the experience too much.
Well, the best tool for ebooks is that you can look stuff up by keyword. So, right. I mean, I go to Amazon probably every day just to do the look inside book scan, just to see, like, where was that quote? I sort of remember in the physical book, it was on the upper right. And what was in that? I'm just looking for a keyword in the quote that I can then type in and then find the quote and like, oh yeah, okay. And then, back to the physical book again, because I couldn't remember exactly where it was. So it's a useful tool for that for sure. But I don't think books will ever be replaced, physical books. I think we'll always have those. Hopefully.
No, I agree. Well, I think I'm maybe single-handedly keeping some of the book industry
keep going
in business.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Well, Michael, again, thank you for your time, and it was a real
all right,
pleasure.
You're welcome, Dick. Thanks for doing this. Talk to you later.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this interview. If you'd like to support this author and purchase their book, click here. If you'd like to become a subscriber to 5GQ, click here. And I included a couple other interviews that you might appreciate right here. Thanks. Happy reading.